Usually, figuring out what happens during each Manor game comes down to analyzing clues from the second, third, fourth, and fifth birthday letters of the characters involved. For Game 0, though, the clues are much harder to piece together. Only Helena has all 5 of her birthday letters completed, while Emil and Ada only have 3 each. Roy, unfortunately, doesn't provide any hints, and even Galatea, with her 4th letter available, barely mentions the game, aside from a small reference in her 2nd letter. Because of this, our understanding of Game 0 is pretty limited. To piece together what might have happened, I've pulled insights from several lore enthusiasts, especially Leo Phoenix, who, in my opinion, has some solid theories about the Manor Game 0. I've also considered perspectives from others in the community, like Serpy, Local MacBook, and many more that I can't mention one by one. Plus, a YouTuber named Mindsky created a really insightful video on this topic, which helped me connect some dots. Huge thanks to all of them for their work. That said, it's worth keeping in mind that everything I'm sharing here is speculative. None of it is officially confirmed canon. Even the time frame of what happened might be a mess rather than logical. But alas, we've come this far, so I'll try my best to present the theory as best as I could. In a diary entry dated December 25th, Ada wrote about her growing desperation, which led her to finally accept Orpheus's offer. Shortly after, she replied to his letter, confirming that they would arrive at the manor in 2 weeks. This suggests Game 0 likely took place in January. Since the game took place at the asylum, it likely happened after Kurt, who is believed to be among the last patients there, was released, possibly around 1899 or earlier. If we factor in Lily Barriere's profile, the timeline might go back even further, potentially as early as 1896. While these dates are speculative, they help give some context to the possible time frame. Among the participants, Helena mentioned attending the manor for a seminar. Roy was probably there the entire time and may have played a specific role as the designated monitor overseeing the unfolding events. Given this, it's not surprising that many theorize Roy could have been faking Orpheus's appearance, leading Ada to believe and refer to him as Mr. Novelist. Meanwhile, Galatea's purpose seems tied to her artistry. She might have been there to work on, or even create, a new Calliope statue, as hinted at in her 3rd and 4th letters. With the clues from the characters' letters, community theories, and my own interpretations, here's what I think happened during Manor Game 0. Looking at the serial numbers assigned to each character, we can assume that Ada and Emil were likely the first ones to arrive at the manor. Helena probably came next, with Galatea arriving last. Initially, Orpheus seemed reluctant to include Ada as an experimental subject, likely due to her extensive and systematic knowledge paired with exceptional intelligence. However, Ada likely volunteered to join the game. In her 3rd letter, Orpheus mentions, once the balance of rationality is disrupted, it seems it cannot be restored. This line, coupled with Ada's emotional blind spot trait, suggests a deeper conflict. Ada may have been advised, or even asked, to step aside from the experiment due to potential risks or concerns about her involvement. Yet, she likely refused because Emil was also an experimental subject, and she was determined to stay by his side. Her strong attachment to Emil and her rationality seem to clash in this decision, highlighting her vulnerability despite her intellect. The Manor Game seems to kick off with a seminar, as mentioned in Helena's letter. Since it's described as a seminar, it's safe to guess that most of the participants attended, except for Emil, which reason I'll explain later. This seminar, in a way, serves as a way for everyone to get acquainted. Ada, based on her 3rd letter, quickly sizes everyone up. She describes Roy, or Orpheus in this case, as duplicitous, Helena as harmless, and Galatea as dangerous. Helena, on the other hand, sees the seminar as unfair, though what she means by that isn't entirely clear. It might have something to do with how she perceives Ada. Since Helena can't see, she likely relies on tone and demeanor to form her impressions, and Ada's confident or dominant manner of speaking may have reminded Helena of Sullivan, whom she associates with control and manipulation. This seems to create tension between them, with Helena growing wary of Ada and Ada missing her chance to ally with Helena, as noted in her letter. Helena also meets Galatea at this seminar, and they form a peculiar connection. According to Helena, she and Galatea bond over being trapped in a muse. This phrase could be interpreted in two ways. First, it could refer to their disabilities, with Helena being blind and Galatea having her physical limitations. Alternatively, it might mean they're both caught up in something larger, like Galatea's obsession with her inner thoughts, or Helena still being haunted by Sullivan's influence. She struggles to find her own path after escaping his control. However, Galatea's perspective on Helena is much darker. In her deduction quest and letters, Galatea reveals her fascination with creating the perfect Calliope statue. From her biodata, Galatea is described to have a liking for mature women. She sees Helena, a mature woman who fits her twisted ideal, as the perfect vessel for her art. Rather than simply finishing the counterfeit Calliope statue already at the manor, Galatea starts scheming to create her own version, which aligns with details in her third and fourth letters. Interestingly, Emil doesn't get mentioned by anyone at this point, which suggests he probably didn't attend the seminar. Instead, it seems like Emil was quietly handed over for treatment, where experiments involving memory supplementation were already underway. At this stage, Ada is likely the only one aware of Emil's situation, though she still hadn't realized that the Mr. Novelist she was interacting with was actually Roy in disguise. Ada's motivations regarding Emil are complex. She seems to want him to behave as he did during their earlier times together, but there's a troubling implication here. As hinted in Emil's third letter, Ada's desires for Emil may not be as pure as they seem. The experiment aims to turn Emil into a molded tool, essentially shaping him into someone Ada wants him to be. This parallels Ada's own backstory in an unsettling way. Ada's father treated her as a blank slate, shaping her identity and making decisions for her based on his own notions of right and wrong. Now, in a twist, Ada is doing something eerily similar to Emil, trying to mold him into the version of himself she desires. At first, the experiment seems to progress smoothly, or so everyone thinks. Helena's letter mentions that she was drugged based on data gathered from experiments involving Roy. This suggests that Roy was drugged before Helena, raising the possibility that Roy may have originally been the control group before Helena took on that role. During this time, Galatea and Helena grew closer, with Helena becoming more compassionate toward Galatea. If we combine their mutual emotes and details from the Estrella Night event, it seems likely that Galatea began subtly manipulating Helena. She may have talked about the stars, a concept Helena finds beautiful, but can't visualize due to her blindness. Perhaps Galatea framed the stars as a metaphor, speaking about the beauty of creation and finding one's own path in life, free from domination. This message would resonate deeply with Helena, given her past struggles with Sullivan's control. Meanwhile, Emil's experiment began to show flaws. Emil started experiencing manic episodes again. Ada initially managed to keep things under control, having prepared contingency plans for such situations. This highlights her as the most rational participant in the experiment. However, Ada voiced her frustrations to Orpheus, particularly about the lack of security personnel. This could mean one of two things. Either Ada expected staff to protect Emil from harm, or, more likely, to restrain him when he became uncontrollable. Despite Ada's efforts, Emil's episodes grew more frequent and intense, eventually becoming too much for even Ada to handle. During this chaotic period, Galatea witnessed Emil's struggles and began to understand his relationship with Ada. How Galatea came to know these details is unclear, but it's evident she pieced together their connection. Given that the game happened in the asylum, it's possible that, while trying to stabilize Emil, Ada reminisced about their time in the asylum to comfort him. She might have shared memories, blown the whistle, reassured him, or even embraced him, the gestures consistent with Emil and Ada's interactive emotes. All of this, it seems, was observed by Galatea. Galatea started using the information she had to manipulate Ada. Though her exact motives remain unclear, perhaps it was part of her larger plan. One possible strategy was exploiting Emil, possibly by planting doubts in his mind. For instance, she might have told him that Ada's actions weren't truly for his benefit or spread lies to make Emil question Ada's intentions. Alternatively, Galatea could have asked Helena to relay these doubts to Emil. Given that both Helena and Emil were seen as individuals under someone else's control, Galatea might have encouraged Helena to tell Emil that he needed to free himself from Ada's influence. This idea ties into Emil's third letter, where it's implied that Galatea turned Emil into a tool to manipulate Ada. Similarly, Ada's third letter also supports this theory, as I'll explain further on. By this point, Helena had grown deeply compassionate toward Galatea, believing her to be a genuine guide in helping Helena discovers true creation, which, in my opinion, is a metaphor for finding her own independence and purpose. Emil, meanwhile, may have confronted Ada about the things Galatea or Helena said to him, which likely made Ada realize that the situation has become quite dangerous for them both. As a result, Ada sought to terminate both her and Emil's participation in the experiment. She may have requested this from Orpheus, or rather, Roy disguised as Orpheus. At this juncture, according to Leo Phoenix's 010 identity theory, something went terribly wrong with Roy. It's unclear what triggered his breakdown, but one theory suggests it could have been a reaction to the drugs he was given, or perhaps his realization that he was being used as a test subject. A more likely scenario is that the drugs caused Roy to enter a manic state, leading him to rebel against Orpheus's control. This spiral into chaos likely occurred one evening during the Manor Game in the asylum. Roy's manic episode escalated to the point where he clashed with Emil. It's plausible that Emil, seeing Ada in danger during Roy's outburst, entered his own manic state to protect her. The confrontation turned into a violent brawl, with everyone present as witnesses. At some point, Roy even attacked Helena, whether intentionally or accidentally, further escalating the chaos. However, Galatea managed to push Helena aside, preventing her from any injuries. Recognizing the danger and realizing things were spiraling out of control, the real Orpheus intervened. Armed with a hunting rifle, he likely intended to forcibly end the fight by separating Emil and Roy. However, his actions resulted in Roy's death, possibly an unintended consequence of the situation. This interpretation is supported by Ada's third letter, which states, "The original designated monitor withdrew from surveillance." This chaotic scene is also reflected in the character relation menu, as theorized by Leo Phoenix. I would like to add some more into it, though I would save it for later. In the end, after Roy's death, Ada managed to calm Emil despite his manic state, though it's likely she had harsh words for Orpheus before leaving with Emil. Helena, deeply shaken by these events, was also profoundly affected. According to Emil's third letter, she demonstrated greater potential aligned with the experiment's requirements. Though the wording is cryptic, Helena's third and fourth letters offer some insight. In her fourth letter, she poetically recalls, "When he picked up the hunting rifle, I uncovered the truth of fear." This moment seems to mark the beginning of Helena's emotional breakdown, making her a more fitting experimental subject in Orpheus's eyes. This shift might explain why Orpheus decided that Emil had fulfilled his mission and moved Helena from the role of the control group to the experimental group. Another interesting clue is Helena's serial number change from 003 to 013. The 003 designation suggests she was drugged, but the drug didn't seem to have any effect on her initially. However, when her serial number shifted to 013, it indicated that the drug had started to take effect. Before leaving, Galatea may have planted additional seeds of doubt in Helena's mind about Ada's control over Emil, further souring Helena's opinion of Ada. Helena left the asylum that night, while Galatea remained behind for reasons yet unknown. Ada, by this point, had grown suspicious of Orpheus's intentions, realizing they were far more sinister than she initially believed. She sent Orpheus a secret letter, warning him that Emil's identity and his manic tendencies had now been exposed to everyone. Concerned for Emil's safety, Ada declared in her letter that if they didn't receive a response from Orpheus, she and Emil would leave the manor the following evening. Her statement, "Emil's safety cannot be guaranteed now that his identity has been exposed," underscores her growing desperation to protect Emil from further harm. Meanwhile, Helena began noticing peculiarities. According to her, Galatea returned to her room early in the morning, but when Helena tried to call out to her, all she could hear was incessant yet faint banging. Helena decided to send a letter to Galatea, which is puzzling due to her blindness. She would have written the message using Braille, as noted in her fourth letter. This raises a few mysteries. Did Galatea understand Braille? Or was the message written more as a symbolic gesture meant for Helena herself? This remains unresolved given the current clues. Helena also grew increasingly concerned about Galatea's strange behavior. She mentioned that Roy's corpse had disappeared, but Orpheus denied having cleaning it up. A popular theory suggests that Galatea spent the entire night moving Roy's body to her workshop, where she used it to create a sculpture. This would align with the incessant yet faint banging Helena heard from Galatea's room, suggesting she was working tirelessly on her morbid project. At some point afterward, Galatea likely interacted with Helena again, continuing to manipulate her. Galatea might have spoken further about creation, her ideas likely steeped in her own twisted philosophy. Helena, already heavily influenced by Galatea, may have misinterpreted these conversations as thinly veiled criticisms of Ada. This would deepen Helena's growing resentment toward Ada. A particularly enigmatic event followed. Helena somehow came across Ada's whistle and, for reasons unknown, handed it to Galatea. The exact circumstances of how Helena found the whistle, or why she did it, remain a mystery. I would suggest, however, that the whistle, as a personal item connected to Ada, would have served as a tangible representation of the control that Helena wanted to see undone. By giving it to Galatea, Helena could be reinforcing her trust in Galatea's philosophy of creation, where, in her view, freedom from control might mean the ability to carve out one's own path, free from the dominance she saw in Ada's relationship with Emil. This theory also fits well with Helena's emotional journey throughout the story. She is vulnerable, struggling with her own sense of autonomy and seeking ways to express herself without being constrained by others. In this context, her act of giving the whistle to Galatea might symbolize her attempt to free both herself and Emil from the chains of influence she feels have bound them. Meanwhile, Ada never received a reply from Orpheus regarding her letter. Faced with the growing danger, Ada made the decision to escape with Emil. In her own letter, Ada described this as 001, intended to forcibly terminate her participation, indicating her awareness that leaving the experiment was not only a personal decision, but also a direct defiance of Orpheus's control. Helena handed the whistle to Galatea, and shortly after, she began noticing Galatea's true nature. Perhaps it was the way Galatea's tone shifted, or maybe Helena sensed something malicious in her words. It's unclear for now. Despite these doubts, Helena wasn't entirely sure of Galatea's intentions, so she continued going along with whatever she was doing at the time, though with growing hesitation. Meanwhile, Ada was planning her escape with Emil. As described in her third letter, Emil's condition began to worsen rapidly. Here's where things get really interesting. Ada's greatest weakness, her emotional blind spot, became her downfall. She was incredibly rational and intelligent, but when emotions entered the picture, especially unpredictable situations involving Emil, her logical thinking started to crumble, making her pay for the ultimate price. All the files about Ada and Emil stop here, leaving the conclusion of their story open to interpretation, at least until we get more information. What's meant by the ultimate price is still unclear, and we're also left in the dark about what happened to Emil after his condition rapidly deteriorated. That said, I'd like to share my own bias on what might have happened. Here's how I imagine the events could have unfolded. As they attempted to flee, Emil entered another manic episode. Ada, realizing that her whistle, her key tool to calm him down, was missing, became desperate. Emil, now fully consumed by his drug-induced mania, reverted to the violent state he once exhibited as a dogfighting champion. Ada was faced with a gut-wrenching decision. Rationally, the safest thing to do would have been to abandon Emil and save herself, but her emotional attachment to him outweighed her logic. Rather than running, Ada stayed, trying to calm him down. Whether she kept trying until the very end or accepted her fate willingly is up for interpretation. In my bias, she may have chosen to let Emil attack her, possibly sacrificing herself while preparing a way to stop him, like a knife, so that both could die together. This tragic turn of events could explain how Emil became a more singularly purposed and dangerous tool, as mentioned in his third letter. Their escape attempt didn't go unnoticed. In Helena's third letter, she's described as the only Punisher in the game. This suggests the reason why Helena might have been the one taking Ada's whistle. She is seen as a Punisher who punished Ada, and possibly Emil, for breaking the experiment's rules. Still, Ada, in her unshakable determination, fought desperately to save both Emil and herself right up until the very end. Tragically, though, I imagine their story ending with both of them dying, not as enemies, but as two people bound by love and loyalty, attacking each other yet trying to protect one another at the same time. Remember that Ada's default costume has her carrying some sharp tools? Maybe Ada, seeing no other option, allowed Emil to bite her in the neck while she prepared a knife or something sharp to stop him, sacrificing herself to save him from his own twisted mind. It's a heartbreaking thought, but one that perfectly captures the complexity of their relationship. A mix of tragedy, love, and impossible choices. That's the interpretation my bias leans toward. With Ada, Emil, and Roy gone, the story narrows down to just Helena and Galatea. According to Helena's fourth letter, she likely uncovered Galatea's twisted mind when she entered the study room. Pairing this with Galatea's fourth letter and her deduction quest, we can piece together a chilling scene. Helena enters the room and discovers a statue, which is a flawless representation of a calliope. The statue, to her shock, resembles herself, making her realize about Galatea's true intention all along. This aligns with the details Helena later describes in her fifth letter. One popular theory suggests that Galatea may have created statues of Emil and Ada, possibly using their bodies, and numbered them as Muse number 1, Muse number 2, and Muse number 3. If this theory holds water, it could mean Galatea was the true mastermind behind the entire ordeal. Her ultimate goal might not have been limited to crafting the perfect calliope, but also to creating an entire collection of Muse statues. It's definitely an interesting concept, though I'm still on the fence about it. In my interpretation, however, here things might have been played out. Helena, blind as she is, could have walked in on Galatea talking to one of these statues. Feeling her way around to identify what was happening, she would have been shocked to discover that one of the statues was a perfect likeness of herself. If we lean into the popular theory, Helena might also have stumbled upon the statues of Emil and Ada, compounding her horror at the realization of Galatea's twisted obsession. It's worth noting that the statue Galatea worked on might have been incomplete, perhaps missing its head, or, conversely, it could have been only Helena's head, with no body attached. This detail ties into Helena's poetic description in her fifth letter, which I'll elaborate on shortly. This moment appears to be the pivotal turning point for Helena. In her fourth letter, she reflects poetically, "When I entered the study, I knew the truth of human nature." This seems to echo the truth referenced in her third letter. Faced with this horrifying revelation, Helena began to break, as Orpheus described it in Helena's third letter. While Orpheus believed the shocking revelations in the manor would create the perfect conditions for the drug's success, he was met with an unexpected result. Helena remained composed. Her rationality and maturity allowed her to keep herself together, even in the face of unsettling truths. From this point, based on the cryptic details in Helena's fifth letter and various hints throughout Game 0, I've come up with 3 possible outcomes. Helena, while shaken, carefully planned her escape from the manor. In her second letter, she hinted at this possibility by stating it might be her last diary entry. She reflected on everything she had learned during her time at the manor, but admitted she hadn't found the answer to creation, the purpose, or direction for her life. Despite this, she resolved to carry forward the experience and use it as motivation to move on. She also spoke of how both Sullivan and Galatea had influenced her growth, shaping her as she learned about herself and the world. However, they failed to help her understand the true freedom of living independently and embracing her identity beyond their guidance. Curiously, Helena described herself as the sole winner of the Manor's events. Yet, this claim conflicts with clues in her fourth and fifth letters. By piecing everything together, here's how this outcome might have unfolded. Helena likely attempted to escape, taking Ada's and Emil's diaries with her since they weren't in Braille. However, during her escape, she may have stumbled across Galatea. Despite recognizing Galatea's danger, Helena remained composed and refused to harm her. There's a sense of tragic irony here. Helena, despite everything, might have seen Galatea as an innocent child warped by her circumstances. Unfortunately, Galatea's twisted mind got the better of her, and she slit Helena's throat, as described in Helena's fifth letter. Afterward, Galatea dragged Helena's body back to the study room. The bloodstains on Helena's fourth letter corroborate this theory. Galatea then worked on her perfect Calliope statue, possibly attaching Helena's head to the unfinished body, or using the statue's head on Helena's now headless corpse. In the end, Galatea completed what she believed to be her masterpiece, the ideal Calliope. What happened to her after this remains a mystery. This first outcome is heavily supported by existing files, making it the most plausible. This scenario mirrors the first up to the point where Helena encounters Galatea during her escape. However, instead of succumb to Galatea, Helena reasons with Galatea. Perhaps Helena, reminiscing their times together, spoke to Galatea about creation, freedom, and their shared experiences. Galatea, realizing the horror of her actions and the futility of her obsession, might have chosen to let Helena go. There's an interesting parallel here with Galatea's fourth birthday emote, where she is shown creating a perfect sculpture that escapes her grasp, transforming into a bird. This idea also connects to Galatea's first letter, where she describes a bird trapped in stone that eventually breaks free. Symbolically, this could represent Helena, Galatea's creation, escaping from her control, defying Galatea's attempts to shape her into something she wasn't. This outcome imagines Helena succumbing to a manic episode upon meeting Galatea. While Orpheus's drug was designed to manage such episodes, Helena's third letter suggests it failed to work as intended. Under the influence of the drug, or perhaps despite it, Helena might have lost control and violently attacked Galatea. In this scenario, either Helena overpowered Galatea, or Galatea killed Helena. This outcome ties into the idea of the experiment's failure, as Orpheus didn't achieve the composed and idealized results he anticipated from Helena. While all three outcomes are compelling, I lean toward the first as the most plausible, given the evidence in Helena's letters and other files. Of course, Game 0 is layered with ambiguity, and these interpretations are just theories. Based on all the available experiment files for Game 0, we know Orpheus gathered a significant amount of data from the experiment. However, what ultimately happened to Galatea remains a mystery. She might have been included in another experiment, disappeared entirely, or even been killed by Orpheus. It's all unclear at this point. Before wrapping up this video, again, I want to emphasize that everything I've shared here is just a theory. It's a mix of my own interpretations, ideas I've come across from other lore enthusiasts, and discussions with members of the community. I encourage you to do your own research and explore the available materials to deepen your understanding of Game 0. As always, I'm open to hearing your thoughts and discussing them whenever I'm available. Let's continue piecing this puzzle together as a community. This is your broadcaster, Selmina, signing out.